I grew up in a quiet little town, tucked behind rows of sleepy houses and silent stairs. Our family was well off, at least on the outside. To neighbors, we looked perfect. My father, a respected man. My stepmother, gentle and refined. And me, the quiet child who always smiled and never spoke too much. But inside that house, I was nothing more than an inconvenience. My father, once full of warmth, had become a shadow clinging to his new wife's approval. And my stepmother, the woman everyone admired, wore kindness like a mask. When no one was watching, she tore at my self-worth with every glance, every word. I was never enough, never smart enough, never clean enough, never worthy. I believed for a long time that if I just kept my head down, behaved, endured it all, maybe one day she'd love me. Maybe he'd see me. But I learned slowly, painfully, that in that house, love was a privilege I hadn't earned. I wasn't the daughter of the man she loved. I was the ghost of the woman he lost. And no one welcomes a ghost into their home. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day that should have been filled with warmth and laughter. The dining table was set, guests had arrived, and the house smelled of roasted duck and sweet soup. I remember helping set out the last plates, careful not to make a noise, careful not to draw attention. But attention came anyway, heavy and sharp like the crack of a whip. The accusation came suddenly, casually, as my stepmother laughed and lifted her wine glass. "By the way," she said, her tone light, "some money went missing from the drawer last week." Not much, but enough to notice. She turned to me, her eyes already wet with feigned sorrow. "Sweetheart, you wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" The room went quiet. I froze. I opened my mouth to respond, but she didn't give me the chance. "It's just, we work so hard to provide," she continued, her voice trembling. "And to think someone in this house, someone we raised, would betray our trust." She let out a soft sob, perfectly timed. "It breaks my heart." My father stared at me. I had never seen that look in his eyes before. Not confusion, not concern, but doubt. Real, immediate doubt. And then came the words that tore the skin off my soul. "She's been ungrateful for years," my stepmother said, shaking her head. "Always quiet, always distant." I knew something was wrong. She's like a snake in our midst. We take her in, and this is how she repays us. "And ciao dabat. Nui ang tai ao." My ears rang. I couldn't speak. Around me, the guests began to murmur. Neighbors, cousins, old friends who smiled at me every morning. Their voices tangled into one. "Really? I always thought she was strange." Such a shame. No one asked if it was true. No one gave me the dignity of a question. My father stood up, walked to me, and before I could flinch, his palm met my cheek. The sound silenced the room. The sting spread through my face like wildfire, but it was nothing compared to what burned inside. He didn't shout. He just said, "I'm disappointed in you," and walked away. After that, I wasn't grounded. I was erased. The house no longer acknowledged me. Meals were taken in silence, glances avoided me like I was contagious. At school, I caught whispers behind my back. People talked like they knew me now. Not the quiet, awkward girl. No. Now I was the thief, the liar, the ungrateful one. A role handed to me like a poisoned crown. In the weeks that followed, I shrank. Not in size, but in spirit. I stopped looking in mirrors. I stopped speaking unless absolutely necessary. I'd hear my stepmother laughing on the phone, telling her friends how devastated she was, how hard it was to raise a child who wasn't hers. I'd hear my father say nothing at all. Sometimes I lay in bed and tried to disappear into the mattress. I imagined how easy it would be to simply not wake up. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want justice. I just wanted to not exist. But then I found the journal. It was hidden deep in a box of old things, beneath blankets that still smelled faintly of lavender. My mother's handwriting was soft and slanted like a whisper on the page. I read slowly at first, afraid of what I might find, but every word wrapped itself around me like a balm. She wrote about me, how much she loved me, how proud she was even when I didn't know it. She wrote about her fears, her hopes. And in one entry, dated just months before she passed, she wrote, You must never let anyone trample your pride. I won't forgive you if you let pain turn you into a shadow of yourself. I read that line again and again until my hands stopped shaking, until the tears dried, until the numbness gave way to something else, something sharp, awake. I didn't cry after that, not because I wasn't hurt, but because I didn't want to waste another drop of myself for people who never saw me as human. Silence from that moment became my shield, my armor. Not a retreat, but a preparation. Every word they'd said, every look, every whisper, I remembered it all, carved it into my mind like marks on stone. And slowly I began to watch, to listen, to document. They had started a war thinking I would surrender, but I had started building a case. It didn't happen all at once. Vengeance is never born in a single breath. It's built layer by layer, like a quiet storm forming far off at sea. After finding my mother's journal, something inside me stirred. It wasn't rage, not exactly. It was colder than that, sharper. It was the realization that if no one would stand up for me, I would have to stand up for myself. And that meant being smarter, calmer, and more patient than I'd ever had to be. I didn't want to scream or cry anymore. I wanted the truth to speak for itself, louder than any accusation ever could. So I began to listen more closely. I started carrying a small voice recorder in my pocket, one of those cheap ones no one ever notices. Every time my stepmother cornered me in the kitchen to spit her venom, I kept it running. Every insult, every threat she hissed when no one else was around. I got good at hiding things in plain sight. I taped a tiny camera inside the bookshelf facing the living room, right where she liked to hold her daily tea and gossip sessions. I recorded hours of her telling visitors how hard her life was with a problem child in the house. Always exaggerating, always playing the victim. I didn't stop there. I went back to the drawer where the money had allegedly been stolen from. I found the original receipts carefully filed away in a folder. The sum she claimed had gone missing matched exactly with a shopping trip she had taken, something she must have forgotten I had helped carry into the house. I scanned everything, saved copies, dated every single page. Then I started my own journal. But unlike my mother's, this one wasn't for healing. It was for building a timeline. Dates, times, what was said, what was done. I was collecting ammunition, not memories. At night, I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, planning my steps. The idea came to me one afternoon when I overheard her planning her birthday party. A big one. She would turn 50, and had decided it was time to remind the world how much she had sacrificed for her perfect little family. She invited relatives, neighbors, even some old colleagues of my father. It would be a full house, a full audience. Perfect. I spent the next month refining everything. I cut together clips from the recordings, short, undeniable, damning. I matched dates to incidents. I placed them next to receipts and letters and messages. I turned my pain into a presentation. My journal became a script. My trembling hands learned to steady as I practiced what I would say. When the day finally arrived, I was calm. The house was glowing. Balloons floated near the ceiling, the scent of food thick in every room. Laughter echoed in the hallways. My stepmother floated around the party like a queen, hugging, smiling, crying tears of joy when someone complimented her on raising such a polite young girl. I watched it all from the corner, invisible but present. Then came the moment of speeches. My father gave a toast first, stumbling through words about love and strength and family. Someone handed me the microphone, expecting a polite thank you to the woman who took me in. I stepped up. My voice didn't shake. I want to thank you all for being here today, I began. Especially those of you who've always admired how much my stepmother has given up for this family. It must be exhausting. Wearing such a heavy halo, a few people laughed. Nervous, unsure. She smiled, wide and tight. I turned to the television behind me. But sometimes people give up their masks when they think no one's watching. I pressed play. The room fell silent. The screen lit up with a recording of her voice. Cold, mocking, cruel. Telling me I was useless. Telling me she should have left me in an orphanage. Another clip played, her boasting on the phone about manipulating my father. Then another of her scolding me, accusing me, the venom dripping through every word. I let it play for just long enough. Then I pulled out the receipts and held them up. The money she claimed I stole? It paid for her new shoes, and here's the proof. The dates match. I didn't take anything, except your silence for far too long. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a glass. I looked at her, my stepmother, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid. Her face had gone pale. She tried to speak, but her words came out in pieces, crumbling before they even formed. She looked to my father for help, but he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at me. Really looking. As if seeing me for the first time in years. He said nothing. The guests began to shift uncomfortably. A few stood. One of my cousins walked out. Another neighbor followed. The rest sat in stunned silence. I didn't wait for permission. I set the microphone down and walked away. Not out of anger, but out of completion. There was nothing more to say. I had brought the truth into the light. I had returned every lie they fed me, every humiliation in a language they understood. Exposure. She was left standing alone in a room that no longer believed her story. And I, the once silent girl in the shadows, had rewritten my part in hers. In the days that followed, the silence around my stepmother grew louder than any apology she never gave. Neighbors stopped visiting. Friends stopped calling. The smile she once wore so proudly became a mask too heavy to lift. My father, once so quick to defend her, avoided my gaze. He walked past me like a man haunted by a truth he chose to ignore for too long. But I didn't need his guilt. I didn't need his words. I had already packed my things. I left that house without slamming the door. No grand farewell. Just a quiet departure into a life I would finally call my own. The world outside didn't feel kind, but it felt open, full of air, full of choice. I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was simply free. I learned to care for myself in small ways. Morning walks, warm food, silence that didn't hurt. I never forgot what they did, but I stopped letting it define me. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't for them. It's a gift I gave myself to breathe without chains. I didn't win. There was never a prize, but I reclaimed the only thing that ever mattered, my voice and the truth it carried.